Hey, what's going on, guys? Thank you so much for joining me for today's episode. Today, we are returning to the My Favorite WWF LJN Tournament. I just want to thank you so much to those of you who reached out to provide your support, because this is a tournament I've been freaking dying to make for, shoot, man. The last time I made this tournament, I think, when did it end? December 2022 or January 2023? I think it was the last time I filmed or concluded the second tournament. So for those who are just turning in for the first time or haven't aren't familiar with my tournaments, in 2022 I actually made two of these tournaments. First one was so I felt like remaking it and doing it the right way, with the proper backdrop, of course. So I kind of felt like I wanted to make this kind of like a baseball season type of deal, where every year, because I constantly get in new figures, kind of do a brand new tournament. And man, I just did a count the other day, and I think I messed up. I think I miscounted, but my last count was like 320 figures. So we've got a massive tournament going on. Just kind of give you guys an idea of what to expect in this tournament. So this tournament compared to my previous tournaments. We looked at the figures side by side. So if I were to say Andre the Giant was sitting right next to Big John Studd, for example, that would be the first matchup. Let's say Hulk Hogan is sitting next to Iron Sheik. That would be the next matchup, right? We're not going to do that. Now, in this particular scenario, Andre the Giant, I have customs of a Series 1 Andre. So the Series 1 Andre original would square off against the custom Series 1 Andre figures. So that means that Studd would face Hogan. But I have Hogan Series 1 customs. So Hogan would square off against his customs. Big John Studd would then square off against the next one in line, and etc. So it's kind of confusing, but it worked for me. And you might have 7 different customs from Roddy Piper or Brutus Beefcake. So you're looking at one original and all the customs, and I'm basically selecting the one figure that I like the most. I'm not going to do it that way this time around. So, just like what I've been doing the last several of my tournaments, I am going to do a random drawing. So I wrote down all of the names of the figures. They're all going to be selected individually and at random. We are not going to do side by side. That's one change to this tournament compared to the other two. Another thing is we're not going to look at original compared to custom. So every single figure will get an opportunity to go as far into this tournament as possible. I think Greg Valentine was like a round 5 figure the first time I did this tournament, but the second time I did this tournament, I had a Rhythm and Blues custom, and Greg Valentine was a first time elimination in the second tournament. Why? Because his custom defeated him, basically. So this basically gives figures like that the opportunity to go 5, 6, 7 rounds, no problem. So, and another thing is, it's going to give you the opportunity to see some of your favorite figures, customs or original, the opportunity to go as far as humanly possible. And because it's a random drawing, some of the most elite figures you've ever seen could potentially be eliminated the first time around, and you may not see them in the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds. It's going to be a super crazy fun tournament. I know I'm going to enjoy making these, so I'm hoping that you guys, as you're sitting back home and you're watching these videos, I hope you get a kick out of, my choices. Sit back, take notes, say, hey, who would you choose? After every video, put in the comments, tell me, your selections, because, hey, I enjoy hearing your guys' feedback. So, I'm going to draw these names individually. I'm only going to do 4 matchups. Normally, these videos hover around 30 to 45 minutes, so I gotta find a way to kind of make these videos shorter. And because I'm now filming off of my cell phone, I don't want to risk going too long and having the video be unplayable, essentially. So I gotta try to keep it to about 20-25 minutes. So I'm gonna do 4 matchups, 8 figures. Once I draw the names, I'm gonna pause the video, pull the figures, and we'll move forward. Alright, so matchup number 1. is going to feature Tito Santana. That is a custom figure from John Ruggiero, and he will square off against Johnny Valiant Custom, the gold version. In matchup number 2, the Red Earthquake from Print Fury. That's the Natural Disasters Earthquake. Will square off against Macho Man from a customizer I don't talk about no more because, well, for obvious reasons that I've explained before. But I might have to say something because it's going to confuse people if I don't. So we'll just call him WW from now on. Axe. So that should be original Axe. We'll square off against SD Red. SD Jones Red. That's a good matchup. That is a tough one already. Already one awesome figure is going to be listed. It's going to be removed from that. Last matchup is going to feature from Random Treasures, their Texas Tornado. Ooh, damn, that is good. Both from Random Treasures, Dino Bravo taking on Texas Tornado. All right, so let's pause and get these figures pulled, and I will be back in a split second. All right, figures have been pulled. Man, this is a tough one already. These are some good matchups. And making these tournaments, I tell you, man, these tournaments never get any easier no matter how many times I film them. So, first one, we're going to look at Tito Strike Force from 1J Ruggs versus Gold Johnny Valiant. And that is matchup number 1. All right. So, oh man, right off the top of my head, I'm kind of drawing a blank, but I believe it's Hulk $0125 or something like that. I bought a number of figures off of Mercari from that particular seller, and that's where I got the Johnny Valiant and a ton of other figures from. And as we go through this tournament, I will go over some of the figures as well and mention where they've come from, who I purchased from, and what have you. So, because I'm working on the cell phone, I gotta try and make sure I get these in the view of the figure. But we'll start with Tito Santana. Tito Santana, honestly, I'm going to just say it right off the bat. I feel like he is one of the most overrated performers out there. Wasn't a fan of Tito Santana. Now, if I was growing up in like the 70s, early 80s and whatnot, and then was watching wrestling back then, maybe I would have been a much bigger fan of Tito Santana during his Strike Force days and during his Intercontinental Champion, days and his feud with Greg Valentine, etc. But to me, when I think Tito Santana, all I can think is El Matador. I didn't mind the look. I actually like the look of El Matador. I think that's a fantastic look. I think that would make an awesome LJN figure. But Tito Santana, I wasn't a fan of Tito Santana in general. His LJN figures in general are absolutely horrific. One of the absolute worst LJN figures imaginable. And play pose wise, you would think with the arms out that this would be such a fun figure and such a go-to figure, but he really isn't. It's a terrible figure. A lot of these figures I get from different customizers. I get because of the customization and what you get from. And I got a couple of these, a couple different variants. I got this one from John Ruggiero. I got another one just like this from Mark Hackenberg. And they take a hideous figure and they make it incredible. Okay. Slap some paint on the figure, and you know what? This is an instance where you slap a lipstick on a pig and you really do make it pretty. Because a horrible figure, if you're looking at just the purple trunks or even with the white trunks, Strike Force version, this does make a world of difference. With the emblem and the Strike Force lightning bolt on the back and the little Tito sombrero on the back, the sombrero hat, whatever. I like the design. I actually love the design of this figure, and I would classify this almost as elite simply because of the overall look or the design of the outfit. Didn't do anything super special. Didn't have to try build on clothing or anything like that. Just simply painting over the body. Look at the Hasbros. You think they're building on clothing where you kind of like touch? It's nice if you're able to like kind of like feel under there like you're feeling clothing or not. But you don't have to. Just paint over the body. That looks good. Perfect. This looks fantastic. As playable wrestling action figures, I think some of our managers are some of the better figures. Lou Albano, because of the size of his figure, I think is one of the more enjoyable figures. Kind of like right up there with King Kong Bundy, right? I think Bobby Heenan has an incredible fighting pose. You could definitely use him as a playable wrestling figure. Johnny Valiant isn't bad. I'm not a fan, as you guys know, with the whole pointer fingers. Like Jim Duggan with the thumbs up and Vince McMahon with the thumbs up or the pointer finger up. Big Boss Man with the pointer finger seems to be broken a lot. I don't like that. But if this was like a closed fist, this would be not a great fighting figure, but it would be a decent one. Something that you could definitely use as a playable figure. And from a play pose standpoint, light years better than what you get from Tito Santana. Now here's a difficult decision. One is a legit wrestler while the other is just simply a manager. It doesn't matter. I kind of feel like there are a ton of managers that I would put over any of the legit wrestlers in this tournament 60% of the time. I love the color scheme. I think the black and gold is perfect. Being from Chicago, though, it kind of reminds me of like the Latin Kings or something. The Latin Kings gang. So, I don't know. I'm going to shock some folks, but I am going to go with Tito Santana on this item, on this selection here. So I'm going to say Tito defeats Johnny Valiant. And I'm going to be talking fast, guys, and kind of moving a little bit faster than I normally would. Like I said, because I'm on my cell phone, I think once I get to about 25, 30 minutes, I think the stuff shuts down or whatnot. So I got to hurry up and make sure that this stuff actually goes through. Because if I lose this work, it's going to really be demoralizing. Next matchup we said was from WW, the Macho Man Randy Savage, or Macho King, if you will, as he squares off against Natural Disasters Earthquake. So I actually got both Earthquakes, both the blue and red version, from Kevin Pelkey directly off eBay a couple years back. It's a resin figure, so unlike a lot of these other figures that are actually rubber. So resin, it's not necessarily going to play too much of a hindrance, but when I'm looking at the overall figure, I'm looking at play pose. That's the first thing I will always gravitate towards. The second thing is color or design of the figure, right? From actual colors and designs, Earthquake, much, much better. Fighting pose wise, neither one of them has a good playable pose. I guess, Earthquake, you could technically say, be a little bit better up. I'm not a huge fan, you guys know, of the Macho Man figure because of the play pose. And you know what? There's actually a Macho Man figure that I sent my buddy Rob that he was going to do a repaint for me. Dang. I really wanted to include that figure in this tournament as well, because I think that one would actually go very far. But who knows? If this first round goes pretty long, I might get that figure before it gets to that point. So we'll see what happens. So, screw it. We'll call him by name. Eric, he did some things decent on here. He's got the Macho, can't really show it off. It's got the Macho King on the back. I didn't want to take these figures off stands. It's just a hassle to put them back on. Macho King stencil. And I got a number of these figures. Like Rob Jackson, I got a similar one from him. I got one from Eric. I think I got a couple other figures, not quite this design, but very similar to the Macho King look. The rub was a nice touch. The crown easily broke. I kind of had to like throw some tape in the hand of the scepter, because when he was asking me about the scepter and he's like, do you want to drill a hole? Or I didn't know what he was asking me. If I had known better, yeah, I would like it. I would have loved to have the scepter actually built into the hand somehow. Because why would you give me a scepter with no ability to hold it, to utilize it? It serves no purpose. And not just from him. You see that a lot with a lot of toy companies. NECA figures, for example. I'm trying to think of other companies that do it. Sometimes with the urns from like Undertaker or something, the urns will be like too big or flimsy, and it pops out of the hand. If you can't utilize the accessory, it doesn't serve a purpose. You're generally just keeping it by the feet of the figure, and what good does that do, right? So, Macho Man or Earthquake. I really want to say Earthquake. I'm going with Macho Man on this one, guys. There's a lot of faults I find with that one, namely the accessories breaking off and being underutilized, but there are some color schemes that I like about it, and the robe was a nice touch. Macho Man already, because of who he is as a character, one of my all-time favorite wrestlers. That right there, I've always said in these tournaments, who the person is should never really count, but it's really difficult to put that aside and say, well, you know what this person meant to you from childhood or whatnot should have absolutely no bearing whatsoever. Of course it's going to play some kind of role in your life, or some role in your decision. It has to. So Earthquake, probably one of my top 10 favorite wrestlers. Definitely a top 3, maybe top 5 at worst favorite bad guys. So it's one of those things where it's a really tough decision. Now, this is why I like having duplicate figures. I obviously have my main figures on display, but I also have like the secondary collection where I keep some of my favorite figures as like backups, just because. And when I do tournaments like this, having spares really helps because I don't have to touch the main display. Now, this one was a good matchup. This is an excellent matchup because you have 2 premier figures. And we will start with Demolition Axe. Obviously, with Axe, I am not... Up until the time I started collecting LJNs, I was never familiar with the whole red devil face, as I always refer to it. I never saw that look before. Now, obviously, as I've started collecting LJNs over the years and, watch old matches and stuff, yeah, the look is, I want to say not synonymous, but I've become more familiar with him, with this appearance and with his posters and everything. But no, you think about Axe with the gray face that you get from like the Demolition Hasbro figures. That is my Demolition Axe. That's the one that I can remember from childhood. That's the one I remember watching and rooting for. This right here, to me, if not a top 10 LJN figure, should be a top 15, maybe a top 20 figure at worst. At absolute worst, top 20. But because of one stupid creation for this figure You take one of the greatest LJNs of the entire line and you make it probably one of the bottom third of the LJN figures. I don't know why they did this with Jesse Ventura and why they do it with the Axe. Jesse Ventura, showing the whole muscle thing, but strutting your pose type of deal. Maybe fine, whatever. Action figures. You look at Hasbro, 1-2-3 Kid, Ric Flair, Rick Rude. You look at LJNs, Jimmy Snuka, Iron Sheik, Jesse Ventura. I just don't understand why people make figures that are intended for kids, for play, and act like they've never been kids before and don't realize that it's absolutely horrible designs. Understandably, nowadays, when you look at these companies from Zombie Sailors and Hastel Toys, even like when you look at stuff like Ram Treasures, pose or play pose isn't the most important thing because they realize that these are not going to be for kids. These are adult collectors. These are people that grew up with these particular type of figures from their childhood and they're living those nostalgic memories. So they're kind of focusing on particular poses, like Hulk Hogan bending over the ring, kind of doing the little bear hug pose that he does, right? It makes sense in the ring. It doesn't work for a Series 2 Hasbro figure. It's because it's a terrible design for a playable figure, but it's just bad design. Love the figure overall, probably at 9 out of 10, maybe less only because of this, but SD freaking Jones. I've never even heard of SD Jones. Of course, before I started collecting LJNs, I would probably say more than half of the characters from the line I never heard of. But SD Jones, even though he's not a mega superstar, he's a jobber type. And he's infamous with the King Kong Bundy WrestleMania 1 9-second match. Quote, 9-second match. Still, what was it, like 3 decades or more he spent in the company? Loved by Vince Sr. and Vince McMahon Jr. Was part of WrestleMania 1, okay? Had 2 figures. 2 released in the same series. He was obviously a beloved man in real life. And arguably, probably the greatest action figure ever made. And it's really hard to talk about awesome action figures because there's just so many. As a kid growing up in the early 90s, right? So Hasbro's will always be my number one choice. And when you look at figures like Yokozuna from Hasbro, nowadays you look at Mabel from like Grapplers and Gimmicks as an example, right? You look at One Man Gang from like Zombie Sailors as examples. Heck yeah, those freaking things are badass. LJN alone, take out all these other companies. Think about just LJN. Hulk Hogan. We always say Hulk Hogan has the greatest fighting pose, which is true. But you can say the same thing about Kamala, which is very similar. Bended knees. Not quite bended knees from SD Jones, but is it any worse? That new King Kong Bundy I just got in, same pose, with the punching and the choke slam. Oh my god. To me, perfect. And this, to me, what Ram Treasure should have done with their Undertaker, a nice chokeslam. They kind of did it a little bit, but like their punching hand was like way too low. It was like down here. But if they raised the arm higher, it would have been a much better figure. But still, I mean, when we get to that figure, we're gonna have some nice things to say about it overall. SD Jones, to me, this is an absolute no-brainer. SD Jones absolutely obliterates Axe. And in fact, in this tournament, I think SD Jones pretty much obliterates almost every other figure. With that being said, I could say that he obliterates almost everyone else, and he might lose in the very next round. It's very well possible. It all depends on the drawing and who he faces in the next battle. Now, if that last one wasn't the toughest decision, both from Ram Treasures, Kerry Von Erich versus Dino Bravo. We'll start with the Texas Tornado. So, about 2+ years ago, from Eric, I got a resin figure of this exact same figure, blue trunks and the works. And 2+ years later, Ram Treasures, they come out with their Kerry Von Erich figure with blue trunks and all that. And I'm like, I have to buy Ram Treasures, right? I have to buy everything Ram Treasures. I got to keep my collection strong. Got to support the company, and so on. But because I already have a blue Kerry Von Erich, I didn't want to get the stock photo. I wanted something different. So I talked to Nat. I'm like, hey, I saw a photograph that someone had designed where they had some kind of like tassels on the boots. And I'm like, hey, I don't care about the color design. Can you come up with something clever that kind of incorporates tassels into the overall look? And she sent me something where he's in purple. Was I disappointed? I wouldn't say disappointed. I really liked the look, but I just wasn't familiar with the look. So I'm like, is that just some random color? Now, I think it was like maybe a 1989 Battle Royal or something. So I did actually see him in this exact outfit. So it allowed me to kind of incorporate this look with a particular matchup or something. And I think a lot of time when you get like customs or something, you want something to associate with the actual look, right? I mean, it'd be nice to kind of put your own spin on something, incorporate your own design or color scheme, but a lot of time it's about what the person actually wore in real life or what they wore in ring and stuff. So awesome. And plus, rubber compared to resin, that right there was a must-have. Figure, absolutely fantastic. A solid piece. If the arms, again, it kind of like a Tito Santana. That is what's killing this figure for me, and what's always killed this figure. I think the first time I did this tournament with my resin figure, he made it all the way to like round 5. But the next time around, he was eliminated in the first round. Now, it didn't help that he faced the incoming champion who would go on to win the entire tournament again, but still, that he wouldn't have won that tournament either. And it's based on pose. Dino Bravo is a hell of a figure. I think this is where Random Treasures were probably at their best in terms of rubber. Because when you sit there and you squeeze the rubber of this figure, feel this chest. That chest, the rubber is phenomenal. And if all of their figures were like this, if they're I don't know, friggin' some of their earlier figures, like Bob Backlund, I always complain about because the rubber is super thin and terrible color design, and just, you kind of like move the hand a little bit. All I did with the figure was like this, and it ripped. So obviously I was super angry about that. But once they started upgrading and using this beautiful thick rubber, amazing. He's got that El Gigante Galoob look, which kind of ruins the overall look. But the pose is adequate. I mean, it's not quite Haku, so it's not as bad. It's still playable-ish. The overall, thickness of the body and everything, very Dino Bravo-esque. The overall look and design throughout the figure is incredible. No doubt, fantastic piece. Both figures, really solid, awesome pieces. Deserve to go multiple rounds, 2, 3, 4 rounds if possible. But based on the selection, one of them has to go. Who do I choose? I don't know. It's a hard choice. But I think for the second tournament in a row, Kerry Von Erich is going to be eliminated in the first round. And that's tough, man. Being a 5th rounder the very first tournament, and then being eliminated the first time around 2 tournaments in a row, that's terrible. But guys, we're hovering around 30 minutes already. We're at 30 minutes now. So hopefully that there'll be no interruptions, and this video will be able to be published without issue. So thank you so much for watching, guys, and until next time. Thanks for watching, everyone.